another dimension, a dimension of insight, a dimension of understanding. You are entering a place where reality collides with truth. There are no limits, there are no boundaries. This is Off Planet Radio.
We're here with Stephen John Miller. He is self-taught, over 20 years experience studying and applying the law as a jurist, researcher, and private law practitioner. And he has been interviewed on numerous talk shows over the years, including Coast to Coast AM with John B. Wells and Late Night in the Midlands with Michael Vara. And he has a YouTube channel. He's also a musician, and he speaks on a number of issues, including the law, including the political situation of the United States specifically, and spiritual conditions at large. I want to welcome for this segment Stephen John Miller. Welcome back to Off Planet Radio.
Thanks, Randy, and thank you to invite me back. And it's a pleasure to be here.
It's good to have you on, my friend. You've been talking to me in the background for a while about some things that you believe are going on in the country, things that are getting ready to happen, and your own preparation, and your basically shout out to people that they need to get ready for what is about to occur in the United States. So give us a little bit of your intelligence background, whatever you're getting through the pipeline right now.
Okay. I've got a friend that works for Google, and I can't say any more than that, but you have his email and phone number, so it's a real legit guy. That he was told before September. Now, he works in the underground shelters for Google. I didn't know corporate people had shelters, but apparently they do. So he's a chef for this particular several different companies he represents underground. And above ground, he has a top security clearance, and he told me, in fact, he's heading out towards my way. He told me, they told us to be in our safe place by September if we had one, but they didn't offer us anything. And he goes, and all the barbed wire in these facilities, if you're going into the underground facility, there's a gate and the barbed wire spaced, so nobody can get out. And same with the top ground facilities I work at. They're definitely prison camps, and the kitchens are set up for the employees of DHS and Google and stuff like that. And he goes, it's very frightening, the things that I've seen. In other words, this is ready to happen. You can tell by the way, because he's been working for him for years. And he goes, and their demeanor has went from normal business to like, everybody's panic and doesn't look, you look at people, you can tell they're thinking, all the time. So what do I believe and extrapolate from another source I've got from DHS and also one from Department of Defense. I think New Madrid Fault is going to either be set off intentionally, which is hearsay and conjecture, but still, that's what I think is going to happen. Now, I live in southwest Arkansas, and they've moved hundreds of temporary morgues southwest here, and also southwest Missouri. Now, what's weird is on the other side of the Mississippi River, they're doing the same thing on the east coast of Tennessee and Kentucky, hundreds of them. So what they're doing is they're keeping as far away from where the disaster zone is going to be possible. And then you send in your boots on the ground after the disaster is over. So then they'll, come in from, east and west and take care of, mop up or whatever. This is what their plan is. Okay, now on top of this, Russia has told our government in no uncertain terms that if you start a shooting match over here with your mercenaries, because I know what you're doing, we're not stupid, because I will take out your underground safety system. You will not have any place to run to. Most of your population will survive this, and you'll be overthrown. And that's recent. That's when he disappeared for 10 days. He was talking to his advisors, put his Navy on DEFCON 3, which is the highest alert for Navy. And that's when he sent the chilling address to the whoever the dark side is, telling the president what to do, basically. Because I think they've all been blackmailed for years. And so in other words, I don't think they're necessarily 100% into all this stuff. the more I've studied it, there's a lot of blackmail going on, and maybe devices planted in cities that if we don't go along with the game, that they'll detonate these things and turn us into a third world country real quick. And now there's a lot of information out there. Veterans today, I don't necessarily trust them completely because certain entities on that show, are obviously working for the government. So I don't believe half of what they say. But a lot of what they've said has come true, like perfectly true. And they have been fighting, going to Syria and telling Syria, hey, there's a criminal cabal that's taken over our country. Going back to Kennedy. Kennedy wanted to stop all this stuff. And since then, we've been we've been occupied by these criminals that have no regard for the law. Now, you can watch this on YouTube of Mike Harris actually addressing the Syrian government, which takes huge cojones, to do what he's been doing. So I think we've actually negated a world war and negated a complete collapse of the dollar because too many countries still hold our dollar as reserve currency, even though the BRICS alliance has dropped us and demanding their gold back. Even Merkel from Germany is trying to get her gold back, and she's very angry because the Fed Reserve sent her a pallet of gold, and it didn't have the German stamp on it, and it was watered down with a stamp they didn't recognize.
Oh, yeah, this is this famous fake bricks that they've been sending across the pond to different nations since the George W. Bush administration, and basically bonding gold with a similar weight metal. I'm trying to remember what the metal is now. Question I have for you is, do you believe, is your intelligence telling you that they are going to implode the present economic system in the United States, or is it going to go down on its own, or is that just not part of the plan but something that may just organically occur?
No, the system's not going to crash until it's going to be roughly December 2016 when the country is in utter chaos. What's that? How far from now is that? About 8-9 months. So they're going to keep it alive until 2016, and then due to unforeseen circumstances, natural events occurring and things, they're going to go to their underground shelters and they'll be on TV from there. And once things calm down and the people calm down and the fires start going out, they'll reemerge and then inject trillions of phony dollars into the system to bring it back to life and make people feel happy again. But that's the time of temptation they talk about in the Bible. But that's not until 2016, probably June. And then just about the time things are starting to calm down a little bit, that's when the pole shift's going to happen. Right around probably April 2016. And that's when all hell's going to break loose, and that will be the official, I believe, beginning of the tribulation for the whole world because of tsunamis and high winds and stuff. So that's the timeline I've got from top level, DOD, DHS, Google sources. That's, we're looking at, this summer we're going to know things aren't right. Okay, go ahead.
No, this summer, well, what I find kind of interesting in all of this, Stephen, is that we have this situation with the Fukushima plant. We have a tsunami that goes back to 2004 in the Indian Ocean. We have the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, which has basically taken out that portion of the Pacific Ocean. The radiation from Fukushima is clearly taking out all kinds of life along the eastern rim right now and moving rapidly, both airborne and waterborne, into the United States, has been for some time. What is your sense that the new Madrid Fault is a target for some type of energy-based deployment of some energy-based weapon that would basically trigger this cataclysm? Because we've been actually looking at predictions about the new Madrid Fault, I guess, for maybe 10 or 15 years.
Yes. You hit it exactly on the head. Even my DHS source, when I mentioned our enemies and maybe even, darker factions of our own military complex are targeting Yellowstone and the new Madrid Fault. He stopped me dead in my tracks. Says, "You know exactly what's going on, don't you? You know a lot." I said, "I know. I research everything. I'm an inquisitive person." And I said, "So that's what's happening because, how can they prepare, in advance for an earthquake? That's not scientifically possible. Never has been. So something's going on." And same with Yellowstone. If you look at Dutch Scent, he'll keep you up to date on these weird HAARP rings all around the new Madrid Fault. So they're nailing it. Either China, Russia, or factions of our military-industrial complex are nailing the heck out of it. So they're anticipating it's going to go, and it's going to be a nightmare. 35 million people live on the Mississippi River.
And what we would
right.
expect to see at that point is basically a bifurcation of the United States. I don't think if the new Madrid Fault does what it's projected to do, that you would see a contiguous United States anymore, much less a constitutionally mandated nation as we once had. I sort of see at that point that the country basically splits off into regions.
Yeah, that's actually already happened in the background. Sarah Palin, she will be the president of Alaska and probably Oregon. Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's already going to be president or dictator of California. And I had it backwards, California and Washington. Now, the West, like Arizona and these areas, they have people already picked out to actually be president of those areas. And so it's already, now when Congress signed this agreement letter with Benjamin Netanyahu, that was wholly unlawful because he's not here as a welcome guest. Yeah, he was a guy that worked in America, and he renounced his citizenship and moved to Israel. So he came back here without any permission, completely unlawfully, and then went into our Congress, which means everybody in Congress that day, renounced their citizenship. So America has been dissolved since that day. I mean, officially on paper. I mean, in your face that, they were just telling the Americans there is no America. They were all cheering and applauding Benjamin Netanyahu completely. On such an unlawful scale, what they did, that's the end. We are in a civil war now. It just nobody's fired any bullets yet, but it's coming.
Much like when foreign leaders visit, such as Queen Elizabeth or the Pope, we have the sense that Mr. Netanyahu came here representing something other than just simply being the head of state of this tiny little nation in Israel. He represents, in my opinion, the titular head right now of the Zionist state. In other words, the visible leader of what's basically the shadow government, which is in fact the Zionist Nazis that run the United States. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's exactly what happened. When he did that big grandiose speech and got him to sign that letter supporting his position in Syria, nuclear power and uranium and stuff, that was in your face telling the American people who have a clue about the law and the Constitution, that was in your face a dissolving of this country and the announcement of a one world order. That's what that was, that a lot of people missed it. They didn't get what the symbolism was in that speech.
Strangest thing to watch from a distance, because first off, we've had this almost imperialist presidency for, I guess, decades now, probably going back. I think Reagan certainly ramped that up, and then George H.W. Bush after him, and it's just proceeded to the point where the president now is able to just bypass Congress completely, do whatever he wants. We don't have declared wars. We have police state actions that occur with the, basically the swipe of a pen. And yet at the same time, it looks like in this instance, Congress was basically thumbing their nose at this president, who the only virtue I've found in the presidency of Barack Obama basically has been that he has kept Israel at an arm's length. This is like the strangest political paradigm I've ever seen.
Yes. Well, from day one, actually before Barack Obama was, appointed president illegally, him and Benjamin Netanyahu were already stark enemies. And I'll tell you why. because Rahm Emanuel is big enemies with, Bibi Netanyahu. Well, Rahm Emanuel's Obama's, right-hand man. And so they never got along, and he was never going to go along with anything that the right-wing Christian Zionists, and I hate to say it, but that's what they are, and those 47 senators were predominantly Republican, showing that they're nothing more than criminals. You're a Christian by rear end. A Christian, lives humbly and peacefully. So this whole conflagration is a joke. So you have one criminal empire, the Marxist communists of Obama, fighting what's left of the fascist, which is Israel. That's fascism left over from World War II. They're the Khazarians, and they run the Federal Reserve, they run Hollywood, they run, all this perverse industry of porno. And, 90% of the downloads on the internet are porno. That's all the Khazarians behind that. And let me clarify myself. I'm not anti-Semitic. The Palestinian people are the true Semitic people, and I'm not anti-Jew. But I am anti-Talmud, and I am anti-Khazarian Zionist, because these people have been on a war path forever, since I was a kid. Just bloodthirsty sacrifices of our soldiers, and it's just disgusting. And you know all about that stuff.
Absolutely. Isn't it ironic that we have this great big lunge towards the Ukraine, which on the surface of it looks like we are basically running towards Russia.
What?
But at the same time, you mentioned there about the Khazars. And I made a comment on this network on Duncan O'Finian's show several weeks ago about the fact that I'm almost expecting at some point to see Israel itself make a run at the Ukraine, largely because it's the homeland of the Khazars. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. Benjamin Netanyahu, or Netanyahu, I call him, he came out and admitted. You'll have to look that up on Google, but you'll find it. I don't have the video or anything to that effect. And he came out and said, we found out we're not, Semitic after all. We're from the Khazarian Empire, which means we should actually take the Ukraine. That was his own words. He admitted it. Okay, they're learning more and more about their genealogy, and that they should actually be in the area where the Ukraine is, and that he said that land belongs to them. So who do you think's over there causing all this fuss and then using American tin soldiers? Like, oh, you have to support Israel. The Bible says so, or you're anti-Semitic. No, I don't. Even the regular Jews that I know that are Torah Jews, and they don't support any of
the conservative, the ultra conservative wings of the of the Jewish religion, the Orthodox,
right,
and
yeah, the Jews we're talking about that came here from Poland and Germany and Europe. They're not all Khazarian Jews, but the Zionist Khazarian element is the hateful element. And how come, in the 1800s, they were in South America looking for the Holy Land, trying to find a place to buy. And then they went to Texas, and Texas was going to give them a huge place, way bigger than Israel. And they just missed doing it by a few people voting out of it. So, if Israel is the Holy Land, why were they trying South America in the 1800s? Why in the 1900s were they trying to move into Texas and had full support of, America? Nobody knows this stuff. But they, so this is obviously a battleship placed in the Middle East, a giant battleship for America and the Queen and the papacy. And we'd rather go along with fascism and nationalism of Israel than go along with Marxism and communism of the left wing. So we have this battle going on, heated battle right now in our own country between both factions,
Interesting how now they're owning up to their heritage. When back in 1970s, Arthur Koestler was writing about the 13th tribe and the Khazar origins of European Jews, and all of that was completely poo-pooed and heretical. And now all of a sudden, as we see this gigantic political lunge towards the UK or towards Ukraine, we now have them going, oh yeah, that's right. This is almost like, oh, we forgot. We aren't really Semitic, but we're sort of Semitic, but oh, that's right. This whole thing is such a setup.
Or whatever their claim will be.
Yeah. It's an incredible setup. It's a wag the dog operation, because I've said for a long time that Israel is the 51st state of the United States, but it may actually be the center of power for the United States. If you just look at the money that's flowing through Washington, D.C. from various groups, including IAPAC and John Hagee's Christians United for Israel. And,
right.
you know,
what a sickening, vile man John Hagee is. He should be hung from the highest cactus. He makes me physically sick.
And see, all of this has to do with all this churning that's been going on for decades, the media churning over Israel and the constant reminders about the Holocaust and the insistence by Jewish-controlled media that we pay homage to their dead while ignoring the dead that have been slaughtered in the deserts of Palestine for, well, generations, since actually going back to the 1930s. And I say all that not to be hateful, not to be spiteful. There's many fine Jewish people that I've known, but that until we all wake up and realize exactly what is being done here, this is a gigantic power grab, because once they move into Ukraine, there's really no stopping the advance forward of going into the oil-rich region of the Bering Sea and basically encroaching right up to the doorstep of Russia. So obviously Mr. Putin has to play a very, very clever game of politics in order to continue winning support while at the same time shoring up his own breaches. Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. And, like you said, this started actually in the 1920s after World War I. The American government said, well, we got to get our foot in the Middle East because, there's massive resources there, and this would be a good place to start and launch World War, the biggest World War ever. And this is how these guys think. And just because we can't think that way because we wouldn't ever harm anybody, that's how these guys think. It's industrial scale war, and there's huge money in it, and it gets rid of a lot of the population, and it keeps people working. It's sickening. And so they went to the Shiites in the 1920s, and they were turned down by the Shiites. So they got their door in with the Sunnis. And so, and this moved on through the 30s and 40s. They tried to get a war going in the 50s with Israel, a world war, and Saudi Arabia, and what's the other country? Lebanon, and 3 different countries. That didn't work, okay? And so then they finally got Iraq got chemical weapons from Reagan, okay, sarin and mustard gas. And since the Sunnis were on the inside giving information to the enemy, okay, between Iraq and Iran, that's where our information hub was the Sunni tribes, which were, directly in bed with the Kurdish people. So that's why they used these weapons on the Kurdish people. It wasn't because, just to test one, because they were kind of riding the fence there. And so, of course, Iraq, after 8 years, couldn't win, and they really wanted that to be World War III, and Iraq couldn't win. So, I mean, this has been an ongoing thing right up till present, till Putin put the kibosh on it and said, if this starts, you're going to lose all your underground shelters, and I'll leave the population centers there, alive to overthrow you. And that just happened recently. And then Kissinger comes out and says the old world order is in flux and the new world order doesn't look good. Yeah, because they're done. That's why.
I can't help but think that they couldn't have planned more poorly than the way this has all worked out. I think 10 years ago we had the inklings then of a plan that included sparking up World War III. I mean, it goes back to Albert Pike and what he was talking about in letters to Mazzini about the 3 world wars and the fact that the Third World War would largely be over the Israeli state. So it still looks like they can work their plan one way or another to get what they want, but this World War III being off the table, I wonder, I struggle with what I hear in the alternative media, especially things that are coming out from people like Fulford and people like that who seem to change the tone and tempo every week. Do you really think World War III is off the table, or is it World War III as we expected it to be?
No, it's actually off the table, and I'll tell you why. They realize, once they realized there's no way they could win this without sacrificing, literally, Israel would be turned into Putin's words, where he told them exactly this: "I will turn you into a tiny ashtray." Okay, and he meant it, and it scared the hell out of Netanyahu and his advisors. And ever since, they've been doing like any prideful man that just had his butt whipped. They've been putting on this big show of power, and lots of them clapping in Congress and the Senate, and lots of empty words and threats. Okay, when you go up against the Russian bear, you better not use empty words and threats, because these are not stupid people, and they've been planning for this for decades, and they've mapped out all these underground cities and watched them be built. So that put the kibosh on it, because if they don't have a safe... See, in the 1960s, when Kennedy was shot, the cabal was going to start this World War III, and they were going to go to the Caribbean. Okay, that was their only safe shelter at the time. They didn't have the underground facilities we have now. Well, at the time, the Caribbean was in a terrible famine, and you couldn't even catch fish 100 miles out at sea. There was drought. So that put the kibosh on that. And, of course, Kennedy not wanting to get involved in the Bay of Pigs and threatening, the Kremlin, telling
Khrushchev.
Yeah, to back off. Okay, so that stopped their plans again. So then that's when they started building underground feverishly, and money started disappearing. And that's what the Vietnam War was for, was to raise, hundreds of billions of dollars for their continuity of government and distract the American people. Here's the new enemy, communism, And, once you watch their game and how they do it, you can go back in history and say, okay, I see what they were doing here, and they wanted a backdoor into China, too, because China they considered a threat. So China's no threat. Armies don't mean anything anymore, because we can drop one tactical nuke on your battalions. That's the end of you. So it's all just a big fear game now. The American people should actually relax, because if these guys were to try some crap, or Benjamin Netanyahu, let's say, detonate something in a few cities, because that's what I think is going on, is nuclear blackmail from the Zionists on our government. That's what I honestly think is going on. And I think the dark side of our government is behind that, helping out. But I think they've learned if this happens, we're doomed. We'll be overthrown, really quick, because people will be so pissed at that point, So,
it's just, you look back on history, Steve, and it's the weirdest thing in the world. In 1972, we're at the height of the Vietnam War, and Nixon goes to China and begins what is essentially laying down the groundwork for what would become, over the next 40 years, the transfer of American industrial might into China. I've never completely understood how the media at that time sold that story to the American people in any way that it was palpable. I mean, here we are. We're watching the evening news with Uncle Walter and Huntley and Brinkley, and the body bags are coming home, and the protesters are in the street, and President Nixon goes to China to negotiate with Mao Zedong, the chairman of China at that time, which was behind the Red Vietnamese, South Vietnamese forces that we were opposing in Vietnam. None of this makes sense. But then you look back and you see the obfuscation and the smokescreen and how these guys run, and every enemy turns out to be an ally to the cabal and an enemy to the American people on one level. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, and like World War II, the reason we went after the Japanese is the Japanese, they're a society without any religion, and that's a bad model for the Illuminati, because they can only start wars with generally religious people and use those different tribes against each other, and what they're doing right now in the Middle East. So Japan was actually on the verge of vanquishing the dictatorship in China and setting the people free into more of a Japanese democracy. That's why America got involved, because they didn't want to see that occupied by Japan, because they're a much more vicious bunch of fighters than the Chinese, and if they got control of that country, that would be an imminent threat on America. And they, so it's the America's fault driving out Japan that 100 million people are murdered in China. So you can blame that on America. That's America's fault. Japan was trying to set China free, and everybody's got this false ideology that Japan was over there just doing something bad. No, they weren't. They were trying to, quash this communist government in China, and the Chinese people were for it.
There's a lot of weird history there. I mean, if you go back to the early part of the 20th century between the Chinese and the Japanese, you have what's nearly a vendetta. And I'm trying to reconcile some of this, because you have the rape of Nanking that occurred, and that was the slaughter of Chinese people at the hands of the Japanese. And most people don't remember this history now. It's kind of lost. But I do wonder if there wasn't some attempt at rapprochement on Japan's part, largely because China did swear a vendetta against Japan. They were warned that at some point the deaths of those millions of people in China would be avenged.
Right, and well, Japan was slaughtering the ones that weren't going to go along with the new Japanese government. That was a minority. The majority would have went right along with it because China was a hellhole when the Japanese moved in.
China was reeling under the what was it? How many years did you have the Opium Wars, with Britain basically taking their entire culture and turning it into an ash heap of unproductive people as a result of using opium as a weapon?
Right. Yeah. And to this day, you go to Hong Kong, and what kind of police officers do you see outside of all the buildings? They're British. So with the Tommy hat on. So, it's so complex. We live in such a complex world, and the people just seem helpless. That it's turning out we're not helpless, because everybody simultaneously is waking up and filing charges against people and educating the masses on, wait a minute, don't agree to any of this stuff. They have no business telling us we have to take vaccines. They have no business going door to door and forcing my neighbor to pay my health care. So that's all, Affordable Care Act is. It's going door to door saying, with a gun saying, you're going to give us so much money to pay these crackheads' health bills on the corner.
Exactly.
That's all it is. That's all they're doing. And then they want to attack Sheriff Mack for asking for donations. Well, at least you can voluntarily donate or not. Affordable Care Act, there's no donation box. Everybody has to pay out of their own pocket. It's a violation of natural law.
Well, they've destroyed the healthcare system. I don't know that America knows this yet. Mr. Obama states that 10 million people have health insurance as a result of Obamacare. I can tell you that an equal or greater number of people are not in the healthcare system anymore as a result of that, because their healthcare has been canceled. It has become unaffordable, which Mr. Obama's own advisors told him this was not sustainable economically. And it was the socialization of the healthcare system to basically take the best and brightest doctors and practitioners out of it and force everybody into a big pharma subsidized system of basically chemical death.
Right. And tens of millions of people permanently lost their doctors and their insurance, and of course threatened by the government.
Yeah, I'm one of them. I'm one of them that doesn't have health insurance anymore because the private sector got the bill, and the bill had doubled and tripled in some cases, and employees and companies have basically said this is no longer on the table as a benefit. The media is not covering that story. Yeah. That's a story nobody's covering.
Yeah, so 3-1, lost out big time, but they only talk about the 10 million that got Obamacare. They're not talking about the 30 million that lost everything. So it's disgusting, and people aren't going to wake up, Randy, until they go a couple of days without food and electricity, and then they're going to say, okay, why is all this happening? And that's when the government will. You see, I tell people about logistics, because people are living in fear. It's like, if you're going to garrison the city of Chicago, you need a 1 million man army, highly armed, You need all the logistics in place. You got to feed these guys. They have to have a place to use the restroom. They have to have a place to sleep. You have to have infrastructure, guys to go in there and fix the different vehicles and oil them. It's just not possible. And that's one city.
That's one city. Yeah.
Cities.
Yeah. And large and small. I mean, just imagine the logistics of locking down New York, which is containable because it's an island, but maybe not so much. And then Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Cincinnati, you can go on and on. You're talking, this country really can't be locked down in the way that I think most people have imagined.
No, it's just not logistically. They don't understand logistics. Even if I send a 100-man militia into a town to protect those people for whatever reason, let's say the Chinese invaded, that 100-man militia is going to be very expensive to feed and clothe and proper toiletries and medicine and keep the equipment working and bring ammo in, replacements. It's a huge astronomical problem, and it's just not one that can be dealt with. We only have a 1-million-man army. You can bring in all the UN troops you want. That's another 3 million. That's enough to cover a few cities. But to lock down every city, they'd be turned into hamburger.
Well, and this is not a nation of cities. I mean, we have cities that connect everything, but fly over the country and look at the Midwest, look at the northwest part of the country, the mountains, the enclaves, the deep south where you have large rural populations. And all of a sudden you come to realize that the country itself, which is really, let's just say it, this country is a nation of nations. The states themselves were sovereign nations once upon a time. And that's why I went back to the idea that we would see this fractioning of the United States entity into regions, but probably even dissolving later down into much smaller units. There's no way you can't manage this large a piece of real estate with this diverse population. No.
Look at Katrina. They couldn't even imagine one city and a couple of counties. It was a total nightmare. Wait till it's everybody, and wait till it's because black people, they're less educated and less armed in this country because they've been dumbed down and treated like crap for hundreds of years. So they're barely making it. Well, wait till it's the educated people that do have a lot of guns and aren't going to put up with their children starving. I mean, it's just not doable. I mean, you're just the most powerful military in the world, Randy, is just 3 states. I won't even add all the other ones. It's Michigan, Indiana, and Wisconsin, right? Those 3 states are the most powerful army in the world. Nothing could touch those guys. And now
militia.
Add Illinois, exactly. Add Illinois, Ohio, Missouri, Arkansas. I mean, this isn't doable, and they know it. But it's a fear. They want to keep us in a catatonic state of fear right to the end, and they'll just disappear. And I really don't think they'll be back. And that's just my opinion.
As we kind of wind up this interview, I want to touch on a couple of areas, and one of them is the current state of law. You're very much plugged in to the law community, especially from the standpoint of your relationship with Sheriff Richard Mack and the constitutional peace officers and sheriffs across the country, and people who, let's just say, have gotten themselves in high water with the law, and you've worked with helping people resolve some of their legal situations quite successfully, I might add. What is the state of law right now? Are people waking up to their actual rights? Are they getting smart about dealing with police and courts? Is that awareness beginning to spread a little bit, Steve?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I would say thousands of people a day are actually making notes and taking them with them in their car and learning to record, any kind of encounter with law enforcement. I say that tongue-in-cheek because they're not law enforcement.
Right.
They're private contractors.
Private security forces.
Under color of law, which is color of law is a violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and it's also a human rights violation under the UN treaties. So everything they're doing is illegal. I'm just courteous to those guys because they're not all bad. Some of them really do try to uphold the Constitution. I'm courteous to them, but I don't answer questions. I stay in honor, and I don't sign anything unless it's VC. If there was a Vicar Terrace, the 3 dots before my name under duress, And then when I get in court, I'm really good at, pointing out all the felonies they committed to drag me in under the Trading with the Enemy Act, which Title 10, Section 333 supersedes the Trading with the Enemy Act. It puts them right back under the Constitution and all federal and state laws. So, and plus, I always get the name of the prosecutor. Say, can I have your real name? And if they hum and haw, I need your real name because I didn't find your name on the official roll of attorneys in the state Supreme Court. I believe this is the imitation legal process. And before the judge will allow you to say the same thing to him, he's going to take a recess and they'll reschedule and then they'll throw the case out. Because you just exposed the fraud that these guys aren't even attorneys. They're practicing under an assumed name, an alias, doing business as without a license. They're complete frauds, every one of them. So that's a big remedy, but say it kindly and, with kindness, because they have guns.
Yeah.
And it just, but if you're going to say anything in court, it better be prosecutorial in nature. Don't answer questions. You're not obligated to. It's up to them. They brought the controversy in to have the burden of proof or prove anything to the contrary of what you say,
Yeah, you're not, and this is something people have to understand, the wisdom of children. As well, you're very familiar with a case that you and I dealt with recently involving my son. And the objections made by the police officer in a hearing had to do with the fact that the officer was completely caught off guard by the fact that my son would not talk to him. And as we pointed out in our papers and our motions and filings, and also the public defender pointed out in court, where were we ever under the obligation to speak with you? And I think this is where the American people need to wise up and realize that a lot of our problems have been self-incrimination, that we've basically allowed ourselves to be corralled into these illegal police operations at every level.
Yeah. Say, you know what? I'm not obligated to speak to anybody. I'm not a slave. I'm not indentured servitude. What's your cause of action today? You have a probable cause affidavit? Can you put, a competent witness on the stand? I'm allowed to, talk to the grand jury, because you're going to need a grand jury indictment, buddy. Under Corpus Juris Secundum, Volume 38, Section A, I get to interview the grand jury, tell them my side of the story. Okay, so if you don't have anything, I suggest you let me be on my way. That's what I say. And they'll let you be on your way real quick, because, anybody that knows Corpus Juris Secundum, Volume 1 through Volume 3, grand juries, they're going to leave you alone pretty quick. It's knowledge. And I say it fluently. I don't have any notes or nothing. It's just off the top of my head. I know what to say and what not to say,
You mentioned earlier about people having with them certain documents, especially when they are traveling, not driving, traveling in private motor car, not operating a motor vehicle. So give us a couple of tips on that as well, Stephen.
Well, there's one thing I would do to prove you're not a citizen is file a 6203 assessment with the IRS, because when they answer those, that's proving that you're not a citizen, you're a private person. Private person has all the power, okay? So when they answer that, if they're claiming there is money outstanding, you can put the person, the living man or woman, to sign the assessment on the stand and say, do you have firsthand knowledge of me doing these instruments? Is your computer database always right? And the only answer they can give is no, and that's a reasonable doubt, and the jury is going to throw it out. On the other hand, they won't return your 6203 assessment, so you keep your, you send it certified mail. You keep your copies. You're dragged into court, say, no, I've been asking for an assessment for 3 years. Their failure to provide me an assessment, an accurate assessment, shows I'm not a citizen. I'm just a private person. And that's the end of that case. So if you want to get out of citizenship the easy way, instead of all this other stuff I've heard, and I would carry an affidavit of truth. I carry a writ of mandamus, which is the same thing, right of the kings, and it says nobody shall speak to the Father in my place or my behalf, and you'll not use any pagan, court systems or or laws on my behalf. It goes through all the detail in great detail, 2 pages long, and it's notarized. I carry that too. And I'm very respectful. And if the police, I never heard of this. I said, buddy, you know what they say about the ignorance of law is no excuse? You know why they say that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because everybody's presumed to be a lawyer. That's right. Yeah.
That goes into another interesting area as well, is how law was taken over by the, the Bar Association, the British, what is it, the BAR?
Accredited Register.
Yeah. That, in fact, that's all private law that is being practiced under the corporate structure of the United States, not as the de jure constitutional United States.
Right. Yeah, they take little snippets out of the public law that's in rolls in the state capitals. They take little snippets out called revised statutes. Okay, and then they copyright that through the Crown with the company in Canada, but they never give you the remedy, because all they do is take a snippet out of the public law, use that against you, and because they can't actually charge you with that code, because we're under martial rule, they can only charge you with curfew violation, like vandalism, martial rule. So in other words, if they bring you in under some statutory infraction, they're committing statutory fraud, because all the statutes were repealed, turned over to international law in 1945. So there is no law.
There is no law.
No, no law. No, there's not. So if they bring you in, it's for curfew violation or uttering a foreign currency. That would be the true, bonded complaint that would, be sold on the stock market. If you were to read it, it wouldn't have anything to do with what they're saying, because they can't do it. It was all repealed. Title 1 through Title 51, all repealed. So how can they bring you in on anything, except for under the Trading with the Enemy Act, Title 50, U.S. Code, Section 23. And that's, like I said, uttering a foreign currency, which is Federal Reserve notes, quasi-in rem property, personal property violations, and that kind of thing, and curfew violation. That's the only way they can lawfully drag you into a court.
In a sense, we've been under martial law for, 150 years now?
A long time since the Lieber Code, martial rule.
That was
We're under martial law. Yeah, martial law is a little bit different. Because not much different, but it's different to the point where the military's in the streets, the police presence is much thicker, everybody checks your paperwork everywhere you go. It's like a paranoid fascist police state. So they'll never go to martial law, because they're going to meet such resistance they can't even wrap their mind.
The final topic, yeah, okay, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you there.
That's okay.
The final topic I want you to go into, and this kind of goes back to the beginning of the conversation, and the things that you think that a lot of people see coming, and that's preparation. And again, we can talk about law and politics and economics and all of these things, but at the end of the day, it comes down to how people are going to survive. So give us the Stephen John Miller quick review of surviving the American apocalypse.
Okay. The number one thing I teach is asymmetry. Okay. You want to avoid people, large gangs of people. If you see the military moving down a certain road near your farm or home, you disappear out of sight. That's asymmetrical. I mean, you can't have any conflagration with these people. If people approach your farm, a family, and they're hungry, you have several people covering you with firearms. You go out there with your hands raised up, say, hi, how you doing? What do you guys need? And they'll tell you, we're starving or whatever. And that's asymmetry. And they don't feel threatened because you're not armed. But you do have 2 or 3 armed people hidden away behind you, in case there's an issue. That's where we're at, Randy. It's going to be honorable. You have to be honorable and spiritual and asymmetrical. Do not try to go after, a bunch of rednecks pull up in a truck with AKs. Well, they're prepared for symmetry. They'll just shoot you down. You see that kind of trouble coming, you sneak out the back door, Jack, and, you run for 100 yards and just lay low. Let them take whatever they want. But you'll be alive the next day. That's the only way you're going to survive what's coming. And you need to be underground. You can build an above ground shelter like a dome, really cheap. Cover it with several feet of soil, or as much soil as possible. That'll work just as good as any underground bunker. You can put layers of material between the dirt, which keeps the dirt from falling down, when it rains and stuff. So that's my only good suggestion. And store up on oatmeal and stuff that lasts a long time, rice, beans. Try to become vegetarian. We've killed enough animals. But, I understand eating fish and fowl, but don't eat mammals. I'm guilty of it. When I look back at the years of Whoppers I've eaten and double pizzas, it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah, try fowl, like chickens, turkeys. I don't think God has an issue with that, although be humane. Fish is good. I'm going by Native American philosophy here. They like buffalo, but I wouldn't. To me, they're too mammalian. We're mammalian. We have our reptilian brain surrounded by our mammalian brain, surrounded by the left and right hippocampus, frontal prefrontal cortex. So we're very mammalian. We're like 70% mammalian, 15% reptilian, and they don't know what the rest of it is. But so eating mammals is not good for your chakras.
Well, I suspect that I suspect that all of this is part of the fallen condition of man, and I'm looking forward to the day when the earth is restored back to its natural order. And, Scripture says the lion lies down with the lamb. Well, I guess that means the lion's not eating the lamb anymore. And
Right.
we begin to restore things back to an order. And, we're in this time of tumult right now. Maybe the best we hope for a short period of time is simply to survive. But I think people need hope beyond survival into what I would just hope would be a new golden age where we wake up and we love our brother and we finally deal with the enemy in the camp and begin to get some sense of stability and peace.
Yeah, and I'm just going to be honest with you. I didn't see any hope for that even 6 months ago. But Randy, things change so quick. And the outreach. Right now I'm on National Geographic TV, and they syndicate me through these 5-part series stuff I talk about, and they really professionally. And so I've been getting phone calls off the hook and help people with bug out land in the mountains, far removed from big populations, around like-minded people, poor people, in other words. Let's not judge each other. Most of all, love each other. And I don't think we can fail doing that. Listen to the voice of wisdom. If somebody like me that's been in the military and a lot of stuff I've done tells you to be asymmetrical, you see people coming up that appear violent, you get the hell out of there. You avoid that whole area until it's clear. Same with any military movements. You avoid those people like the plague. Just stay out in the woods and out of sight, out of mind, and you'll survive what's coming. Because eventually their currency will collapse. They don't have the infrastructure to feed these guys or fix their equipment. They'll disappear. But 3 months, you need to build a lay low or get out, of your shelter as quick as possible. Hundreds of yards away. You'll be okay. They don't have that much power, so be hopeful. Most of the police and DHS I've talked to, they said, when this shit happens, they're dumping their uniform and heading to the hills.
Well, we'll hope that they may dump their uniforms, but that they'll come and stand with us. Last minute here, Stephen, and give people any contact information you want to give them. I know you've got a YouTube channel and email and things like that.
Yeah. For bug out land, which is very important. Me and Randy have a lot of friends listening. Area code 734-931-0278. That's area code 734-931-0278. That's Google Voice. I'm in Arkansas. And then email me, Steven64, just like it sounds, STEVEN 64 at hushmail.com, HUSH, hushmail.com. I'll work with you. I do vet people. I don't want crackheads or methamphetamine heads or addicted felons. They wouldn't last very long. So anyway, I appreciate your time very much, man.
Stephen, we appreciate you, and we're going to have you back on again, and we're going to sit down and do a long interview, and I think we're going to do a seminar on law, and if that's okay with you, we'll line that up.
Love it.
Great. Thank you, my friend. Stephen John Miller with here at Off Planet Radio. On this segment, we will be right back.